Was there ever a point where you both wanted to stop, give up completely?
The relationship.
Many.
Affirmative.
No, with your art.
Right, okay. We're in a tiny little village in the south of France called La Grasse.
Were you holding on to the pieces? Like it was kind of hard for you to sell them?
Sure, because it comes from like some sort of deep place.
Is it a cultural thing? Is it an Anglophone thing? Like kind of this practical mentality?
I still probably come at it like, what's the brief? What does the client want?
When I started doing what I do, even if it has evolved, of course, I never thought about money.
Like it was always like a joy for me to find the creativity with these restrictions around.
But actually living from my art, it's been the last 4 years.
Do you think that has a lot to do with like Lizzy's influence on you?
Well, you can Lizzy thinks that.
You guys got it all figured out. I mean. Interview with Lizzy and Alejandro. Take one. Welcome to Whimsy and Grit. Thank you guys for coming. I'm so excited to have you. My first in-person interview. Here we are at your lovely home in La Grasse, south of France. And I wanted to interview you both because, well, first of all, it's not that often you have two artists who happen to be together as well and in love. Well, I guess let me say a little bit about both of you and tell me if I get this right. So Alejandro, you're from Argentina originally.
Yes.
And Lizzy, you're from England. Alejandro, you're a sculptor. You work in iron.
Essentially.
Essentially, you also work on other things.
Mostly iron. And some glass marbles, but that period is, let's say, done for now.
And then Lizzy, you're from England, and you do a multitude of things. You're a singer, actress. You also do motion graphics.
Yes.
Am I missing anything?
I think that's it. Well, I've done a little bit of writing and directing of my own project with the trio. But yes, it's generally, there are like little subjects that come off of all of those things, but those are the main ones, yes. Yeah.
And what did both of you want to be when you grew up, when you were little?
I wanted to be a vet. Yeah, because I loved animals, and then I went to do work experience and I realised what it actually involved, and then I changed my mind. And so I don't remember really, I remember not knowing what I wanted to do more clearly. I didn't have a clear idea after that point. Yeah.
So you didn't know, what age were you when you thought you wanted to be a vet?
I would say around sort of probably 8 or 9, because I just loved it. We had animals at the house at home, and I just loved them, and I just thought, yeah. And everyone told me that I was, like fairly good at like maths and science and stuff, so I thought that would make sense. And yeah, and then I guess I must have done my work experience when I was probably about 12 or 13, and then
so you actually did a real work experience.
Yeah, I went for 2 weeks and spent 2 weeks with an actual vet. And because I grew up in the countryside, it was like a kind of very repetitive. They were just doing lots and lots of cows, lots of like giving birth, helping cows give birth for 2 weeks, and then squeezing the anal glands out of dogs, and that was it. So I was like, oh, I don't really think that this is really for me. So yeah.
At 12 years old, yeah.
13, yeah.
And what about you, Alejandro?
I don't really remember wanting to be something in particular.
Yeah.
I remember saying to my brother when I was 15, I want to be rich. But that's like, I imagine the normal thing that a lot of people would say at some point, but not really. I really didn't know or didn't expect anything in particular.
I wonder if that's a very American thing then, because like that's something we drilled in when we're kids. We ask like every little kid, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Is that something in your cultures that you have, or not really?
Yeah, I don't know. I grew up in Venezuela, and yeah, because I was born in Argentina, but then I grew up in Caracas. I lived there for 20 years. And I don't know, I remember my dad saying a lot like, guys, to my brother as well, you can do or be whatever you want. You can do whatever you want, even if you want to sell like matches in the street. As long as you like what you're doing, go for it.
Really?
So I had like that really nice base, let's say. But there was nothing like indicating, a way or a path to follow.
So do you think that kind of set the tone for, because this is a topic I wanted to get into, which was, in a lot of ways, it's a question of, do you use your art to live, or do you use your art to, live like with money, or do you use your art to live with your soul, kind of, And I guess it's kind of two examples of this, right? I mean, you do make money with your art. I mean, you the trio, and you were just in London in a play, and you made money doing that.
Yeah.
But the majority of your money typically comes from, would you say, your motion graphics, or?
Yes, I would do. Yeah. So I feel like we have very different perspectives in terms of that question. And I feel that for me, it's always been with this practicality in the forefront of my mind. So as soon as I got to the age where I realized I enjoyed being creative, maybe when I was at university or a bit before, I think I realized, okay, this is great, but how can I actually make this work so I can live from it, kind of thing. So that was always like, for me, the two, it started with the creativity, but the two were always very closely connected.
And I'm just curious, because what did your parents tell you growing up, like, about that? What were the messages?
I had my GCSE, so in England that's kind of like the last exams you do when you're in secondary school. I got straight A's. I got A's for everything, and they were mostly A stars, so it's like A plus kind of thing. The only things I had, two subjects where I had like just a normal A, was in art and in information technology. And so my parents had a meeting with all of the teachers at my school, and they all decided that I was going to be a lawyer. That's a kind of decision that it was like medical or law.
So your parents decided for you?
They had this very strong idea that that's what I should do. And so they came and told that to me. And so I immediately went and did the two subjects that I was less good at, so art and IT, which was my grades, which were the lowest. I immediately went and did that as a kind of like, well, I'm not going to... I just knew I couldn't do like law or medicine. So I picked, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to do like a traditional academic path. It was very clear, but my parents wanted that. But when it was clear that I wasn't going to do that, they kind of they ended up supporting me. It wasn't.
Okay, so they did like finally. And I mean, I'm interested because, like, Alejandro, do you think that is something more in your culture, or do you think it was specifically your parents that were kind of super supportive of whatever you did?
I think that was my parents, but I have other friends from the same period or from the same culture, let's say, and I don't think they were struggling against something different, so. I don't know. I imagine there's many people like that as well, But I wouldn't be able to say if it's really like a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. Probably there's more people, like my brother did what my dad did as well. He's like a doctor, psychiatrist. He followed the path in a way or of the family, because there's a lot of like doctors in the family.
Okay.
But there are also artists as well. So. But yeah, I wouldn't know if it's really a cultural thing. I wouldn't bet on that.
How long have you been solely living off of your art?
Actually, I started creating, let's say, if I fell on it or down on it, or I just encountered what I will say it's like my path when I was 22. And I've been doing that for the last 33 years, Actually, I started making some money with my art, let's say maybe 10, 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. But actually living from my art, it's been the last 4 years.
And do you think that has a lot to do with like Lizzy's influence on you?
Well, I can see Lizzy thinks that. So. No, for sure, I think for sure being with her and like her energy and just her way of being and her culture has helped me or pushed me in a way, in a subtle way, to do, let's say, what I needed to do.
What was it that you needed to do, like
It's
specifically?
it's difficult to say because I don't think it's very like objective or concrete, something that you can show. I think it's more like Lizzy will probably talk better about that than me, but it's more like an energetic kind of thing of being more open, actually,
Oh, interesting.
to let the work in a way go, and I think that's in a way it's a lot of what has happened. Not only that, for me it's important the context where we live, the people I've met since we're living here.
Yeah, explain a bit about where you live and like how that's changed kind of things for you guys. And
We're in a tiny little village in the south of France called La Grasse. So the nearest kind of two towns would be Narbonne and Carcassonne. It's about an hour from the border with Spain as well. So it really is a tiny little village, about 600 inhabitants and medieval style, and in the middle of the Corbière Hills. So it's in wine growing country, very rural, like a little kind of paradise basically. It's very, very beautiful, like a picture postcard little French village. And before that we were both in Montpellier, so it's a much bigger city, and obviously before that I was in London as well, which is even bigger. And so it was like a very, very big change to come suddenly to a place that was in the countryside with not many people.
And has that changed both of your processes or how you work, and how so, I guess?
I'd say for me it's made it more challenging, because I have a trio, a close harmony trio, and when we need to do gigs I have to drive usually at least 3 or 4 hours to go anywhere to any. And so, yeah, getting in the car, loading everything in, driving 3 or 4 hours, having to set up, then do the actual gig itself, then take everything down again and then drive back. It's like a really long day to earn not very much money.
Applaudissez très fort pour les
He was a famous trumpet from a Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was a top man at his craft.
So for me, I would say it's been more of a challenge that I've had to work out. But I think for you, it's been
For me,
good.
for me, it has been very good, and in a way, I've like, let's say, optimized my energy, because I have my workshop that is an open workshop and sort of a gallery at the same time, but it's more of a workshop, but where I can actually show my work and even sell it, and it's really under our place. So I just have to go down the stairs and up to go and work and open it. So for me, it's pretty interesting the fact that I have to learn in a way to work with an open workshop where anyone could actually pass and see my work or see me working. So it's been like an interesting,
like a built-in sales kind of.
Yeah, exactly. It's been like at the beginning, I used to say like a love and hate relationship with the public, because in a way they're disturbing me, and at the same time, there are potential also public that could be interested by the work, and not only buying it, but just to be touched by it or wanted to talk about it, So, but little by little, I've been like much more open to that, and I actually now. I think it would be like pretty difficult to return to that old way of, because already like creating like, let's say, fine arts, if you're a painter or a sculptor or I don't know, another kind of creative, that way it's like a alone kind of action. You're by yourself in the workshop. At least I am.
So I think Alejandro, what you do, you need solitude, and actually a lot of, motion graphics, I guess you could technically do, you can do in your own bubble, but like singing and dancing and acting requires other people. And so there are those like constraints. I know, I don't know if you're okay with me saying this, but you're potentially looking at moving somewhere else you're okay to talk about that? Okay. And I know that that's like come up with, you need a place where there is people to be able to do your art, and you don't, I mean, you need the through
Yeah, I
traffic,
need-
right?
Yeah.
But you don't, to do your art, you don't
Let's
need
say
it.
that I need a public at some point because, yeah, working and doing what I do, of course, I don't need, in a way, anyone but myself to do that, at least in a very direct way. But yeah, for it to really become art, it has to be in a certain context. Needs a view from others, an interaction. I'm not alone in this world, so yeah, I need people as well. For sure.
Oh my God.
At
But
different
not
levels.
while you're in the process.
No, not
Yeah.
while I'm in the process. In order, but it's just part of the bigger picture. Let's
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
to live as an artist, let's say, and be able also to.
You're a living piece of art.
Yeah, but it's an important. Yeah, well, it's an important part of the. It's a very important part of the process to have a feedback, and to have to show my art. I don't know if it's like an eternal quest for love, also for others, or recognition or whatever, and it's there, and it's important for me actually. I don't see, maybe some artists will never acknowledge that, either you're too neurotic to acknowledge it or to even be conscious about it. But of course, there's a part that you need that feedback. It's like, you know what I mean?
Has it changed your process at all? Like now that there are people that come in while you're in the middle of stuff, has that changed kind of
It doesn't.
your relationship with your art?
I don't know. Probably in a way or another, it conditions also what I do. Not necessarily the base of what I'm doing, but it's just the way that I connect with the art. I can't connect like a whole completely, but I'm much more able to just disconnect and reconnect with much more ease than before. Before, if I was really like into my process and anyone would come and to see me or say something, I would almost tell them to fuck off, But
Not almost, he would.
sorry, but today, I can. It's true that, and actually, what you were asking before, how the relationship can affect or condition or help or transform. It's an important part of that, because it was not obvious for Lizzy or the relationship at the beginning when I had this, like my normal way of creating. I was going to my workshop and disconnecting completely from almost everything else. And that means the relationship, Lizzy, the house, everything. So it was complicated each time I came back here to reconnect with this thing, however you want to call it. And so, being with Lizzy and in a relationship, and speaking with her and having a lot of conflicts as well because of that, helped me in a way going, like I had to adapt, it's that easy. It's like to be able to do both, So I learned it's more the relationship in a way that actually the people passing by, but it's a mixture of both, that I learned to just connect and disconnect, like pushing a button, much more easily. And that's also because it's been more than 30 years that in a way, it's like I know that place where I have to be able to enter,
Yeah. I mean, do you think it's like, I always think about this Meryl Streep, and she talks about the method acting, and how she could never be a method actor because she has to go home and like cook her children dinner at night. And do you think it's a gender thing? Like, do you think? I mean, I always hate this. I hate reducing things to gender in general, but sometimes I do think that, men can be more singular focused. And I mean, even just interesting, like what you both do.
Yeah,
like,
nobody's equal anyway.
yeah.
Like genders, individuals, I mean, we're all different in a way.
Yeah,
And we're all
100%.
alike as well, but
I think
Yeah.
it was something very practical. Like literally, it was like time to have lunch, and then it would get to like 1 o'clock, and then 2, and then it was 3, and I was still like, and he was, and so I think, yeah, maybe as a woman, I have more practice, and also because I think of my personality, which isn't really related to being a woman. My personality and what I've ended up doing is like multifaceted and multifunctional. So I'm doing like many projects at the same time, and I seem to be balancing different dimensions at the same time. But that's something I specifically worked on as well, like myself. Like I specifically did work on that, on like being able to be here, simultaneously holding that space, jumping into that space, coming back, and it was something I consciously worked on. So I don't know if it's really to do with men or women. I just feel like we've got very different styles of, like you connect so deeply and so profoundly with a point that I totally understand. It's difficult to then just make a sandwich. Like I get that, but my experience is much more like
more
plate spinning kind of thing.
And it's because 90% of the times when I cook, I don't make sandwiches. I cook real food, and I'm the one who cooks 90% of the time. So it's not only making a sandwich. That would be easier.
I like sandwiches.
Let's say it just for the record.
It's very
And
important.
that's true, actually. He makes pasta like he makes art, so it's like really like intense,
Yeah,
super
when I cook
nice,
in general,
super good.
it's like,
It's
that's
very good cook.
That's why there's conflict sometimes when I'm in the kitchen, or a lot of times, that you want to participate,
Impossible.
Because it's like you just said it. It's like I'm not creating at four hands. I create by myself, and in a way, cooking, even if it's for us or for whoever is there, while I'm doing it, I have like this same sort of maybe more close or obsessive way of putting myself in action, and it's like that. So
Do you think you'd ever be able to create with somebody else?
I managed to grate a carrot the other day next to him.
yeah,
Oh, great. Is that creating?
Wow.
not really, but I've done it, but very like in a particular way, like cadavre exquis. It's this French formule that I don't know if the surrealists who put that, who invented that name, I'm not sure actually. It's just when you make a piece of art with different hands, be 4 hands or 6, it could be 2 people or 3 people, doing something together, a picture. So at some point I did that when I was in art school, or with a painter friend, or even in a party with other people. So I managed to put something of me, trying to respecting at the same time what it was put there by others, and trying to make a balance of all of it, because I was not alone. But it's not something I'm able, but it's not something that really interests me, at least for now.
Yeah, how do you balance the process of like when you're, in the middle of something and you're in the flow, and then somebody's like,
He's grumpy.
Yeah, well, I can. That depends on the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can be pretty like harsh in a way. I think people notice it directly just looking at my face. I can send very like nasty vibes, but I can also like change those vibes in a like microsecond if the person who's there, let's say, gives me what I need,
Do you create with the idea of the public in your mind, or do you create purely like what you want to create yourself?
Regarding what Lizzy said before of her way of working, like with this, like in front of some sort of demand or the money included in the work. I don't know. I'm not going to repeat your words. You said it already. For me, it's completely different. When I started doing what I do, even if it has evolved, of course, I never thought about money. You know, I never started to create or to do art thinking about money. That came very, very late in the process. You know, at some point, I actually even I like to say that people with I speak, I actually at some point sold an apartment that I have to be able to do my art without having to work at the same time
Okay.
to earn money.
Because were you doing odd jobs at some point to earn money, or?
Not really, not really. I've been living in France for the last 30 years, and I was able to do my art, let's say, with what I had already. At some point, yeah, I had to work for a couple of years selling stuff in the street, like little, I don't know, things that you wear, jewelry.
Like you would create the jewelry? And
No.
Oh, okay, you were just.
bought that in like I bought it and then I resell it in like holiday seasons and stuff like that, and that allowed me to live for like a couple of years. And I could, I had this apartment that I could sell, and I sold my car, and I sold almost everything that I had, and that allowed me to work for like 12 years without having to think about money. So it was purely just like fundamental formal research, if I could say it in a certain way.
Okay.
And at some point, yeah, it became obvious that if I wanted to keep on doing that, but I have to earn some money, and I wasn't able to split myself and do another kind of work, because actually I wouldn't know even what to do. Yeah, I know how to weld, but it's like, but yeah, so no, I've never done just to synthesize, never done art for money.
And so
At some point it
yeah.
started,
And you were talking about the energy. So there had to. So what you mean by that is that there had to be some kind of. Were you holding on to the pieces? Like it was kind of hard for you to
Yes.
sell them. Okay.
Yes, yes, for sure, because
Yeah.
it comes from like some sort of deep place, and you
So it
have
felt
to
like a part of
you
you.
have to try at some point you balance that deep place with something lighter, even if there's no concession from where the art comes. It's the way that I perceive it myself, so I've never done till even now, even since the last 4 years where I'm actually living from my art, there has been never like a concession of what I do, to make someone happy.
What do you mean concession?
I mean, it's like
Compromise.
Compromise. Yeah, there's like no compromise. You can think about the money, what you created, and that's another process that you have to like learn to deal with it. Just to not, so you can do it in a certain way that it's just there, but it doesn't bother you. And then you think about it and you let it go, because it's not what is really important. But because you're inside a certain kind of game where you're gonna show your work, and that there's a lot of people that are interested in your work, and you're probably going to sell some of it. And because I represent myself, I have no galleries. I don't work with any gallery right now.
Okay.
Almost never done, maybe 2 times in my life. So I'm selling my own work. So it's like, in a way, I have to play that role.
Is that a skill that you started to learn, like how to sell it, how to speak to people, like?
Just natural, I'm just
Okay.
like speak of how it comes. At some point we will repeat a lot of things, of course.
Yeah. So yeah, Lizzy, the question I guess for you then is, do you have things that you create like from your own soul? Because you tend to work a lot with clients, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of a not opposite, because I know we'll come back to you, but I know you do have some commissions now. But like the trio, I guess, is something you created
Yes.
for yourself.
Yeah, but I think I still probably come at it from a graphic designer's perspective, which is I guess what my training was at the beginning. So it was always like, what's the brief? What does the client want? What are our limits around that financially, in terms of the look, in brand? Like, it was always like a joy for me to find the creativity with these restrictions around it.
Oh,
so
okay, interesting.
whereas someone maybe more like Alejandro would see those restrictions as stopping something, I see it more as a game, as to like, where do I find my little bit in with all of that happening.
Interesting.
So even something like the trio, again, it was more an answer to a question. So it's like, I'm in a new country, I've just moved to France, I don't particularly speak the language. I just finished a load of training. I trained in musical theatre, so I have my singing, my dancing and my acting. And when I came to Montpellier, I realised there wasn't really like a musical theatre scene particularly. And so again, it was like a response to a question. It was like, what can I do here that's going to give me a bit of money, that's going to maybe take me to see a bit of France, that's going to help me to exercise my singing, dancing, acting muscles that I've just created or built. And so again, it just kind of, it's like, I feel like the process is still artistic. So of putting myself in that space and just saying, okay, what's going to happen? It's not like I start with the answer. It's like letting myself fall into the question and follow like the way it's going. And then of course you have to take practical action. You have to find people to work with. I did all the arrangements. I did all the choreography and designed the show and all of that and the outfits and everything.
So being with Alejandro, I mean, I guess there must be some sort of mutual respect there, mutual, has he inspired you in any way to then want to create from something else that's not necessarily for clients? Or
I would say, I don't know if he's directly inspired me in that I want to do something in the same way that he does it, but I certainly respect the way that he approaches it, and it's like, in a way, I'm in a real admiration of that, because it's like I've started from that and come that way, and he's kind of there and he's kind of trying to come up this way, and it's like I see that really creates a balance in our relationship as well, because I certainly need a bit of what he's representing, and I feel like, as we said before, I think what I'm representing has helped him as well, and so it's helped us to kind of balance out. I have done things that are just for me, and I feel like it has a very different energy. So I did a lot of embroidery and sewing, and then I felt like there was something very relaxing about it, because there was none of those like restrictions, and there was no commercial element, and it was something much more grounded about doing it. So I really, I'm not doing it so much at the moment. I feel like it's more, I lean more on that as it's kind of like a therapy kind of thing. It's more therapeutic. So to be honest, because there's such a small amount of time in the day, and I'm already my days are already quite full, I feel like I only really start to do that if I'm feeling like I need some kind of balance internally, because it's like a tool that I know I can use to kind of like balance myself if things have got out of balance. I
mean, I relate, more to you, because we're kind of a similar. She's scared. If I talk too loud, my dog gets scared. Because I don't know if it's like, again, that's why I'm interested in the cultural thing. Like, is it a cultural thing? Is it an Anglophone thing? Like, kind of this practical mentality. I was an actress when I was younger, and I tried to do that, but every time I tried to make money with my art, I felt like I put too much pressure on it, and then it like destroyed the soul of it, I felt. And I think it feels like you both are kind of in this perfect balance, because I mean, you're creating what comes from your soul. You're able to sell that without the pressure of like conforming to others. You like being able to have those restrictions, or and I agree, like sometimes it's really interesting to see like what comes from there. And then you're also now starting to find a balance between like doing stuff for yourself. So you guys got it all figured out. I mean,
it's a constant process. Ups and downs.
Do you ask each other for feedback on your work?
I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know. I think from certain aspects of the work, let's say, for sure. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't, let's say, when I'm building a structure, creating a piece, working on a new piece, that is all like follows one, follows the other, follows this like this big piece in many parts. That's almost, I could say that. I wouldn't ask Lizzy, but I will show her the work. When she sees it, she won't give really like a feedback, like a profound feedback, because I'm not asking for that neither. But she will, in a way or another, set something that will just like permit, let's say, the energy to keep on flowing.
Oh,
You know what I
cool.
mean? So it's something that it would be difficult for me to get something more precise than that.
Yeah.
Because I probably will revolt naturally against anything that comes
So she knows you.
from outside, and even if it comes from Lizzy.
Let's talk about material for a second. Like, what is it about your respective like expressions of art? What do you think it says about you? Or do you want to say, what do you think it says about him? Or
Oh yeah, can we do that?
Yeah, sure.
It's like therapy a little bit. Okay, so well, I remember when we first started like dating, and I looked at his website and looked at some of his work, and what I was really struck by was the fact that even though you were using metal, and so you were like literally cutting up bits of metal pipe and like welding them back together. So it's something quite like not masculine, but something very strong and like hard and like industrial. But I was really struck by the way that your pieces were so organic, and you'd managed to really get that balance between like this very hard material and very hard like physical way of doing it, but the actual pieces themselves would look like something out of nature. And so I could feel really almost from the beginning, from just looking at your work, that there was something about you which was very strongly into balance. And so if something, and it's who you are as a person, like sometimes feel good and sometimes not so easy to live with, but if something's in front of you, you're automatically going to the other side to try to, not because you're annoying, but because you want to like balance it out automatically.
You can say that I'm annoying.
And it is a bit annoying as well.
I assume
It can be
completely.
a bit annoying, but I see that quality of you is always like looking for the balance, and I think that's why, yeah, you make like organic, natural.
I used to make.
It's
The
this-
work has evolved a lot
Yeah,
in
no,
the last years.
it has evolved, but there's still something quite, for me anyway, quite organic and yeah.
And what do you think Lizzie's choice of material says about her?
It's difficult. I don't know. Why can I? Why? It's just her choice of materials are very different and very precise of the different things she's doing. But
Like her
it's like if you're a
body and-
singer, you need music. So you know what I mean? Yeah, I like what she's done regarding the trio, and you're talking about material. So the music is like an ethereal material, if you
It's
want
also
to
her
say.
voice, right? Her body
Yeah,
she's using.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, well, just regarding the materials that Lizzy uses, because she acts and she sings, so the materials in a way is her own body, you know, her own self. So yeah, I think I've seen her act, and she's really like 100%, you know. I'm actually surprised. I haven't seen her act in that many different roles, but she can be like a dramatic actress, like I think naturally, you know. She will be more dramatic than like in comedy, for example, even if she probably can as well, because when I saw you in Paddington, it was much more like comedy, but just in a way that is so super expressive. So yeah,
Did you have
I'm
any
always
footage?
surprised, like
Yeah.
when I see her, it's like, oh wow.
Is
It's
that
like,
her?
Yeah, it's like in a way, yeah, I'm surprised because I don't know what to expect in a way. I don't expect usually a lot of almost anything, you know what I mean? So, but she's very, very intense and very good. So,
Well, which is interesting, I think, about we going back to what we said about how you kind of create from yours are always came from kind of like your own thing rather than necessarily outward. But it's interesting because your instrument is like the most personal thing it could possibly be, which is your body. So in some ways, it's like, okay, maybe you're doing it, with a script or with somebody else's words or with somebody else's music, but you're using your your body, you know, to create that art. So I don't know what that says about you, but
Yeah, it's true.
gonna-
It's true that we don't necessarily pay that much attention, or we don't necessarily talk about that. But it's true. It's true that you need that all of this outside input that I use from inside, but I use like an external materials and tools, and you use yourself.
Yeah.
So in a way or another, there's a very pretty much complementary, if you want. It's very different, but at the same time, it can make like a whole, you know.
So kind of taking it a little different way. Was there ever a point where you both wanted to stop, give up completely?
With the relationship.
Many.
Affirmative.
No, with your art.
Right, okay.
You can,
I'll have to say, sorry, is that the full question?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I'll have to say, yeah, certainly with the acting and singing, because for exactly the reason I think you mentioned.
Lena, hold on.
it's all right.
She wants to be a star.
Lena, come on, get. Oh.
So yes, in answer to that, I would say yeah, definitely. With respect to the singing and acting, and I think it's connecting to the point that you just expressed, which is that it's so deeply personal, and so, as everyone or many actors have already experienced, with acting comes quite a lot of rejection, and so and often it's not in a very kind of concrete way. So you'll just be endlessly self-taping or going to auditions and just not having any response, and so you have to be very in touch. I feel I have to be very in touch with my fragility and my vulnerability in order to be able to do those things, to sing and to act and to use the body. But at the same time, it means that you do get, if you're sensitive as well, you do get hurt. It does hurt you when something's not quite right, or it can even be when you are employed and you're not quite able to really get it yet, or it's taking you time to really be able to nail it, and the director's kind of pushing you, and you know it's not quite there, but you don't know what to do to get there, and in all kinds of situations where it does touch your sensitivity. So yeah, I would say quite a few times.
Did you have like a specific moment that you can remember where it was like a dark night of the soul, and then what made you continue like after that?
Yeah, I think really struggling in general with the theme of musical theatre, because it's not really something that I particularly like, even though I studied it, and that sounds really odd, but I don't particularly like musicals. And so many times, like I can remember a musical I did in London, a Sondheim, and at the end of that I was just like, oh, F this, like I'm never fucking doing that again, like what a fucking waste of time, like I don't believe in the text, I didn't believe in the characters, like it was really just like, no, I'm not doing that again. And then I actually went away to live in a community in the north of Spain and just had this completely opposite experience for like the next 6 months. Something very free and open and like completely the opposite, to just kind of like get over all of that. So yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, many times I've thought of letting go of a particular way of expressing. So like the cadre, the format, frame of musical theatre, or the frame of jazz dance, or the frame of choral singing. But it's never been to let go of being creative. I've never felt that.
Okay.
No.
Interesting. How about you, Alejandro?
No, not really. It's been moments, there's been like a couple of 2, 3, 4 periods, let's say, in my art. And at some point, after doing, for example, 5 years of collage, working with paper and doing a very particular kind of work, there was a transition, an important transition, actually where I passed from paper to iron, And in that moment, it's not that I felt that I, more or less like Lizzy just said, it was just like a year of transition, but I never imagined like stopping like art, or stopping creating or doing something. I always felt that in a way or another, even if tomorrow there's no more electricity and I cannot weld anymore, I will find, I will work with wood, or I will work with clay, I will just go back to the essential materials, and I will do my thing. You know, I will spend my time. It will be much more, just working with what I have. You know.
So what does success mean for both of you in your art? Like, how would you define success?
I don't know. Well, I don't know. You could say a lot of things about that. For me, in a way, living how I am living today, that means like being able to do what I love in my own space with like a natural public with a certain frequency coming past, and even being able to live of my work and being recognized at least by the people who sees the work like an interesting work, let's say like that, for the least. It's a pretty good form of success. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm, in a way, I think I'm also, I have the ambition, even if I'm not necessarily put in place what it should be done to materialize that ambition at some point, because that's sometimes contradictions that we have, you know, or that at least I have, between, I will love my art to be seen by the most people as possible, you know, and I think that's every artist in a way, you know. It wouldn't be that far from that will at the same time, you know. And I think, of course, will like to have some of my works in important places, let's say, like international institutions, like a museum, you know. It could be the Guggenheim, it could be the Louvre, it could be the Hermitage. At the same time, if it's to be like stored in a cave under the museum, in the cellar, you know, with another million pieces, in a way I don't see the interest, you know what I mean? So, and that's like 98% of artists that are in the museums. They're stored in, you know what I mean? Right. But in a way it's a good recognition, of course, you know, of like an institutional recognition. But in, let's say that there would be a little bit more of success. You know
what about in like Johnny Depp's house? Would that be a success? Like a star?
But let's say if I meet the person and I like the person, for sure. Yeah. If I meet, I don't know, Johnny Depp, I pretty kind of like that guy without knowing him, you know what I mean? So it probably would be cool for him to have a piece of me, but from me. But it could be a piece of you. A piece of my art, Johnny. So, but if you know, I don't know, if it could be like a very known asshole, you know, and it's not because the person is known. You would not want that. Oh yes, you know, it's like not necessarily. I probably use it like a social card, like a joker in a particular situation, because that's, in a way, it's the game we all play. But I wouldn't be necessarily proud because of that. But yes, I would say also another form of success is at some point I could worry a little bit less of actually selling the work. It means that it will be like another dynamic, like a more fast frequency, let's say, higher frequency in the sales, because I work all the time, and even I'm selling my work in a good way. I cannot really complain, even if I will complain always. You know, I will always find something to complain about. But it can be some parts of the year, you know, some periods when I'm not making any money, you know. So, and I'm always been confronted to that. And
what about you, Lizzy? What your definition of success?
The definition of success as an artist is like, I guess, like in two parts. Like there really genuinely is this feeling that happens from time to time, and you can't control when it happens, and it always happens. It's always, when it happens, it's always a surprise, but it's just this little point of magic where you really connect with somebody. So it could be like a little old lady coming up to us at the end of one of our shows as the trio, and you can just feel like a heart connection, and she might say something really not that like kind of surface level, like, oh, I used to listen to those songs when I was growing up or something like that, but you can feel that there's this little piece of magic that's just touched the person and they've responded, and it just like, it always like brings a tear to my eye. It always like melts my heart. And the same when I was just doing this piece of theatre in London, there was a lot of children that came to see it, and so just every now and again, just a child that would come up and just really be in this space where you felt like there's something, I've like channeled something through me and it's touched that child, and like it just, for me, that is literally it. It's like literally why I'm doing it. It's to connect. It's to like connect to something inside myself and communicate that, and for that to touch someone else and to feel that connection. So like broadly speaking, it's just this touching of and connection with people. And then there's like a kind of, I guess, like more egoic idea of success, where wouldn't it be great if I was like booked on a comedy series and I could just do that for like a year, or like that kept going season after season and I was there, and of course that would be nice. But,
yeah, say it now. I mean, you know, this is for posterity.
Comedy
say
series.
exactly what. So next year she's going to be in a comedy series, and
you never know. You have to be careful what I say sometimes, because sometimes that manifestation thing can be very pure, and you have to watch out for what you're actually saying. But yeah, I think.
And final question for both of you. If there was, you know, a young person in front of you who was struggling to, you know, nowadays it's all about like kind of trends and, you know, like getting famous quickly and rather than longevity necessarily. Well, let's say there was a kid in front of you who was like wanted to give up because they felt like, you know, they hadn't hit 100 million views on TikTok, or, you know, they want to create their art and they feel like nobody likes it or they don't have enough. What would you say to them to keep going?
I mean, for me, it's like I'm really very much in the old school. Like the social media thing still is, I struggle, like I really struggle, because I find this point inside of me where I start to disconnect from my sincerity. And so if it was a young person in front of me, I would say just really go back to the beginning and question, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing it? Are you just simply trying to get attention? And then if you are, like, why? Like, is it really something coming from your heart, coming from your soul that you want to express it? And if it really is, then it doesn't in a way matter so much like what other people are saying about it. If it is this deep need to really connect and say something and have the feedback on the thing, it's just to be clear, really, to be clear if it's not going in a good direction, or if it's getting blocked, or if it's feeling like it's not working and it's not flowing. I always personally, I just go back to like the core of like, what am I actually doing and why? And just being totally sincere with myself. And it's sometimes not so easy. Sometimes it's not so easy to be sincere, because sometimes it's a mixture of different things, different reasons. So.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to get real honest with yourself sometimes. So that's great.
Yeah, actually, I wouldn't know what to say to a young person. I'm so disconnected from like just society in general, you know. That and I'm already going for I'm already from like at least one generation more, you know. I don't know what kind of like age you're talking about, but yeah, regarding social media and all of that, even if I use a little bit of Instagram, you know, as just the minimum, you know, I'm a pretty analog kind of guy at the same time. So I don't know, you know, I could only speak from my experience, and I'm already in that place where Lizzy is talking about this really, in a way, need to bring things, create real things that come, as you said, from the soul. I don't know if I would have used that term, but it's a good one. So yeah, I don't know what could I, because at the same time, these young persons today, they've been born inside of this, let's say, technological matrix with the virtuality that implies, and all these new, in a way, ways of thinking, the new, like, people, let's say, new humans, you know what I mean? So it'd be pretty difficult. That's what I mean. It would be pretty. I would say just take a piece of clay, and play. Just see the playfulness in what you're doing. If it becomes very like serious, fuck it, Or then in the balance you should have something very, very important to not be playful, So,
I think that's something we didn't even talk about, but the whole idea of like playing, and is that the point too, to find your inner child? And
I'm like in a way, like a serious kid with playing with metal Legos, you know what I mean? The difference is that my Legos are hollow and I only use like hollow frames of metal to compose my, my structures or what but I
that's why people don't take us seriously as art.
But it is serious, and I tell that to the people, it's like a game, but it's a serious game.
We need it.
And that's the difference, that's what makes sometimes, then it's just definition. But
I mean, to me, that's the definition of a human. It's like, why are we humans? It's like, because we can create art. I mean, for me, that is such a big part of why we're humans. And thanks for opening your home and for sharing your couplehood and your artistichood.
that's a pleasure.
Cool.
Okay.
A bientôt.
See you later.